This is Devlog 1 of The Waking Dream. For these devlogs, I plan on showing off my game as I'm developing it, where I'll be discussing what I plan, what happened during development, as well as what I learned from it and what I expect to happen next. Oh boy, I feel a little nervous since this is the first devlog I'm going to be doing. If I were to describe what I want this to be, I'd call this an RPG expressed through a platformer. You talk to characters, explore worlds, and fight various bosses. I've been working on designing the story and systems for nearly 2 years. The main thing that I've been working on is the collision system, as well as other gameplay systems. For the collision system, I planned on having something where the physics may change. Sometimes physics may rotate, and in a game like that, down isn't always down. There is no way to differentiate between down and any other direction. The idea I had was to have the player be in local space while the player interacts with the world in global space. So if the player's physics rotated 90 degrees, suddenly down is 90 degrees relative to where down is in the world. That way, for anything I chose to do with the player, I could easily handle that no matter how the player is orientated into the world. During my first attempt, I found that it was very successful. However, there were still bugs, especially when I rotated the player constantly. It felt very broken and jank. There was also bugs where the player would go through walls and get thrown onto the other side. It was that issue along with the bugs that made me decide to just scrap version 1 and start over. If this game was going to rely on this collision system all the time, then it needed to be reliable, and version 1 just didn't cut it. With version 2, I was getting a little closer to what I wanted, because I ended up solving the issue where the player was clipping through walls. With version 2, I ended up fixing many of the issues version 1 had. Now instead of going through walls when speeds got crazy, the player would actually stop when they hit a wall. The collision system for version 2 was working, but it still had its own issues. Like whenever I rotated the player's physics, the player would catch onto the edges of geometry and they'd just stop moving. And semi-solids were so broken and buggy, there was no way for me to approach them without needing to completely restart. Not to mention working with semi-solids, because the player moves in local space and semi-solids were in global space. It was very difficult since semi-solids could only see up, down, left, right. But with the player, I had no idea what up, down, left, or right were relative to the player. So while version 2 had the right ideas and slightly better execution of those ideas, it was still not anywhere close to what I wanted. There was also a bug because I tried to combine the X and Y axis for version 2 to try to make the collision more precise, which caused weird, quirky snapback with the player whenever they were jumping and landing or colliding into anything. And then with all those issues, I figured that I should just restart again with a better collision system. And that's how I ended up with version 3 of my collision system. With version 3, I decided to separate the local X and Y axes. By doing so, it made programming version 3 significantly easier. I also figured players would never notice the difference either way if I decided to combine both axes or just keep them separate. This also made implementing semi-solids a lot easier too, because now I knew which axis to resolve them in. A big change I made to semi-solids is they no longer were tied to direction, and instead were tied to a parent and a child semi-solid. I made it so if you were to collide with the semi-solid child first, then the semi-solid would be listed as solid, so you wouldn't be able to go through it. The biggest change I made though was probably having the collision system now work in 3D space. The way I achieved that was by attaching the player to a spline, and that spline would determine the path you take. The movement was fairly easy to build. All it really is just walking, variable jump, and crouching. These were all things that prior versions had, except for crouching. Another thing I did was working on a choice system, which I called the macro, meso, micro system. And with this system, there are big choices from determining story moments to smaller choices, such as deciding to fight an enemy or not. For now, I'm not going to go too in-depth with the narrative system, as well as the macro, meso, micro system. What can be learned from this? I learned game development takes an extremely long time to start. It took me 1.5 years before I finally had something that I could actually show to people, not to mention the many more years that this game will take to develop. Another thing that happened, if there was ever something that I felt wasn't fun or couldn't serve the player, I'd either scrap it, start over, or save it for later just in case I needed it. Throughout development, I'd constantly be asking, is this a fun idea? Could this be enjoyable for players? Does this make sense? Or even, what would players think about this? What would they be thinking while playing through this? What do they know? What will they not know? Or how does this feel to control? Does this feel good? What's a feeling that I want to give off for this game while playing through it? What might I want in the future? Or even, what can't I plan for? That was one of the more important things. Even in the controls, I'd be planning for something that I probably didn't think of. I also asked myself whether I'd be including multiplayer in this, or if it was going to be a single player experience, or if I could switch between both. And if I was going to switch between both, how would I do that? And every time I came up with a design, often it'd be centered around the player. If a design didn't serve the player, it'd either be scrapped or redesigned. These systems went through a lot of iteration and will continue to go through a lot of iteration. What do I plan on doing next? I plan on mainly focusing on modeling, rigging, and animating the player. Now that I've done a lot of planning, the next step is execution. That's all for now for this week's devlog. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.